Okay, real quick, Mike, I want to talk about Dr. K and
Yes, Dr.
the
Kharrazian.
giveaway that we're giving away.
We are giving away 6 different programs of his, from Hashimoto's disease to gut health, cognitive decline, autoimmunity, and one on saving your brain. We're also offering a 40% discount. You can use the code name Bob and Brad. Everything is down below in the description box. And without further ado, here's Dr. Kharrazian.
Yep.
Welcome, my friends, to the Bob and Brad podcast. My name is Mike Keenitz, and I'm a physical therapist assistant. Our guest today is Dr. Datis Kharrazian. Dr. Kharrazian is a Harvard Medical School trained and award-winning clinical research scientist, academic professor, and world-renowned functional medicine healthcare provider. He develops evidence-based models to treat autoimmune, neurological, and unidentified chronic diseases with non-pharmaceutical applications. His clinical models of evidence-based medicine are used by several academic institutes and thousands of healthcare providers throughout the world. Dr. Kharrazian is an associate clinical professor at the Loma Linda University School of Medicine. So without further ado, here is Dr. Kharrazian. Let's talk a little bit more. We talked about leaky gut a little bit. Can you get a little more in depth on it and what are causes of it?
Yeah, so leaky gut was something that naturopaths had in their training and terminology since the beginning of naturopathy, right? Back in the 1900s, they always believed you can have a leaky gut, which means your intestines have basically these like little microvilli and they open up. But just think of like holes in the gut. The intestines get inflamed and things open up. And that was kind of like a folklore thing that happened. And then a guy named Pisano identified the molecule that opens these things up. And then they were able to cause leaky gut in animals with the signaling molecule zonulin. Pisano's also at Harvard Medical School. He's in the gastroenterology department. And since then, it's like, okay, leaky gut's real. And now they're actually developing a drug that's in a phase 3 clinical trial to stop leaky gut.
Oh.
And I'm pretty convinced once they have that drug finalized and approved, which it certainly looks like it's going to be, then the whole world's going to be using the term leaky gut in conventional medicine, right?
Yeah.
But until the drug's made, no one's going to talk about leaky gut in conventional medicine because it's not real yet, right? In the scientific literature, in the gastroenterology field, immunology field, autoimmune field, there's tens of thousands of papers on it. They just don't call it leaky gut. They're starting to now. They just use the term intestinal permeability.
Yeah, right? I think I heard it like 5 years ago or so was the first time I heard leaky gut. But yeah, I think it's getting a little more mainstream now.
It's starting to get a little bit mainstream, but it should be like breaking news. Like this is really important. This is linked to many chronic diseases, inflammatory diseases, brain gut axis, inflammation, chronic diseases, cardiovascular risk, predictive models for strokes, heart attacks, all types of things, right? So survivability in the hospital. These are all linked to potentially to intestinal permeability. Long COVID now linked intestinal permeability as one of the variables and factors. So we all have this potential in our lifespans to have our guts develop permeability, or think of it like as holes being opened up in the gut, and then healing pretty quickly. And some people have leaky gut that stays ongoing because their diet's terrible, right? Now you can cause leaky gut really easily with people, and you can just cause leaky gut by the standard American diet, which is very high in fat, very high in sugar, very inflammatory foods, processed foods. That's guaranteed. If you wanted to create a human study to cause leaky gut, put them on the standard American diet. You'd see a lot of them have leaky gut. But really, what prevents leaky gut is having microbiome diversity, like exercise. It changes your microbiome, movement, fibers, like people that have to eat vegetables, different fibers. The more diverse your fibers are, the more probiotics you have, the more microbiome diversity you have, less likely to develop leaky gut. The less processed food, inflammatory foods a person eats, these all things protect the gut from not developing the so-called permeability, this leaky whole gut pattern, right? Now you take someone who just eats processed food, doesn't eat vegetables, doesn't move, is sedentary lifestyle. I mean, they're likely to have intestinal permeability. Now, a lot of people get leaky gut, but that's not necessarily what causes all the problems. So when you get leaky gut, there's a few things that happen. There's when you look at the gut, the very top is just a lining of the gut barrier. Okay. And underneath the gut barrier down here is a part of the immune system, the gut immune system. And underneath this gut barrier here, you have things like natural killer cells and T cells, and they're ready to respond to anything that's foreign. Okay. So normally your intestines have these little tight junctions, like very narrow, that little digested food particles can go through. But if there's holes and the guts open up, then undigested food particles can just go through the gut. So normally if you eat something, you're going to have your enzymes break that down from proteins to peptides to amino acids, and then they're small enough where the molecular weight's very, very small, so they can go through those little tiny holes in the gut barrier. But when you get leaky gut, these undigested proteins go through, and the immune system starts to react against them and starts to make antibodies against them and starts to react against them. And this is where people develop food sensitivities. So one of the most common presentations people start about leaky gut is they're like, hey, I'm starting to get bloated and distended and feel awful with all these new foods now that I used to be able to drink milk and now I can't drink milk. Whatever the things are.
Right.
And that's where their gut barrier opened up. There's undigested food particles. Immune system starts to react to them. You do a blood test, you'll see antibodies against these food proteins. Immune system has definitely developed not an allergy, but a food sensitivity, right? They're not going to have anaphylaxis from it and can't breathe, but they can get inflamed from it. So that's the difference between allergy and food sensitivity. So they develop food sensitivities. And in a clinical model, we measure food sensitivities with what's called an IgG antibody, which is different than an allergy, which is IgE, right? So intestinal permeability and leaky gut develops food sensitivity, okay? And these food sensitivities then get more progressive and they're inflamed. They eat something that they normally eat all the time, like milk in their coffee or whatever it may be, if it's dairy or something you react to. And all of a sudden their body's inflamed. Now these immune systems in the gut create inflammation. These inflammatory mediators get into what's called the mesenteric plexus in the gut, and then they spread all throughout the lymph nodes in the body. Now there's inflammation throughout the entire body. Now they have pain in their joints, they have pain in their limbs, their back injury is now flared up, their brain injury they had years ago, I don't know, playing volleyball or football or something is now reactivated. These inflammatory cells are turned on now. They have their neurological symptoms again. They can't focus, they can't think. Well, for some people, their Hashimoto's turns on, and more of their immune system starts to attack their thyroid gland. So that's the model of leaky gut. These intestinal permeability patterns where these holes opens up, things that get through, the immune system reacts against them. This inflammatory response becomes systemic, and that triggers on these, adds fuel to the fire wherever the fire is. So that's leaky gut. And you can test for it. You can measure things called zonulin to see if you have it. You can check things like zonulin antibodies. And the worst part of it is something called endotoxemia, which is where leaky gut gets really, really bad. So let me explain that to you. This is important. When you look at the gut barrier, some people may have heard the word dysbiosis.
Yeah.
Biosis being bacteria, dys being dysfunctional. So dysbiosis means you have more bad bacteria than good bacteria, right? So if you eat unhealthy for your gut, meaning you don't have enough fiber, you don't have enough plant foods and so forth, right? And you have a lot of processed saturated fats and all these things, you can then develop dysbiosis, right? So sodas and fast food all the time and no real vegetables is going to put someone's bacterial populations to have what are called more unhealthy bacterial populations. And these unhealthy bacterial populations basically, remember we talked about bacteria in the gut releasing molecules like signaling agents like serotonin, dopamine, or GABA. Well, they release inflammatory chemicals. That's why they're bad. Okay, so this change in dysbiosis, where you have more unhealthy bacteria, unhealthy being that they create more inflammatory messengers that cause inflammation out the body, they're in higher proportions. Now, if someone has leaky gut, those signaling molecules get through and they get into the bloodstream, because as soon as they get into the gut has a pathway called the mesenteric plexus, which is a pathway for it to get into the entire lymph nodes throughout the whole body. So now these signaling molecules that cause inflammation in the gut get into the bloodstream, and it's known as lipopolysaccharide, gram-negative polysaccharide, LPS. And LPS gets into the body, and throughout the body, we have these immune receptors called toll-like receptors. And there's one called TL4, toll-like receptor 4, and these LPS gram-negative bacteria bind to them. And so if they bind to them, they cause inflammation. So there's papers showing that people that have endotoxemia, like leaky gut, with this you can measure it too. You measure blood LPS. You shouldn't have this bacteria in the blood. Okay, If you do, it's called endotoxemia. So if you measure that, and that's high in the blood, that's been linked to cardiovascular disease because it destroys the blood vessels. It's been linked to major depressive disorder where they can't get out of depression. They won't respond to any of the antidepressants. It's been linked to triggering autoimmune diseases throughout the body. It's been linked to chronic pain, fibromyalgia, all these various things. So this is why, like years ago, like someone would go see a naturopath to go, I'm really, really sick. They're like, we're going to get you off all bad food. We're going to put you on a fast. We're going to give you some things to support your microbiome and gut. And these people did this, and all these anecdotal stories like, oh my God, they reversed my inflammatory condition. The first time in my life I felt better. And back in the 1900s, naturopaths were doing this all the time with like, that's obvious. But now I think medicine's, science has definitely caught up, but medicine is now trying to work on a blocker. It's not going to, and that's only going to work on selected types of leaky gut, not to get too detailed, but it's still going to be very beneficial to many chronic diseases when it comes out.
How common is leaky gut? Like, do you have a 1 in 4 people or something, like some stat, or no?
So here's the thing. There haven't been studies where they looked at a healthy population and they go, okay, this percentage of people, so it would just be a guess. Okay?
Yeah.
And then when you talk to practitioners, they're not seeing regular parts of the population. They're seeing people have symptoms, right? So they're not feeling well, so they're going to see them. But I'm going to guess.
How many people do you see for leaky gut? I guess it'd probably be a better question.
Well, I work with autoimmune disease patients a lot, so it's the majority of them, but it's not all of them. Not all of them have it.
All right.
And I would say, yeah, I mean, you could easily guess 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5. Now, if you have symptoms of bloating, distension with more and more foods, if you eat foods and you feel inflamed, if your body hurts all the time, and when you take a break from certain foods, that's a clue you may have leaky gut. If you've ever gone on a fast and you feel a lot better and your body doesn't hurt, you're not as inflamed as much, that's a big clue you might have leaky gut. Because the main trigger to leaky gut is going to be dietary proteins.
Okay.
So what's going to trigger leaky gut is there's holes in the gut. Food proteins that aren't digested are going to get through, and they're going to trigger the immune response to cause inflammation. So when you see significant reactions to foods, whether foods cause massive brain fog or cause massive bloating or cause massive distension or cause massive joint pain, that's a strong indication you have leaky gut. Because normally food proteins shouldn't be such an immune trigger, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I know it's a little different because FODMAP is based off fermentable carbohydrates, but does FODMAP foods relate to leaky gut?
No, FODMAP's a different mechanism. There's another condition called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And what happens in that condition is bacteria, like, we have these bacteria in our large intestine, the microbiome, and we have some bacteria in the small intestine. What separates the small intestine and large intestine is a valve called the ileocecal valve. And what happens with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is bacteria from the large intestine moves into the small intestine through this valve abnormally.
Oh, okay.
And now these bacteria species are in the small intestine that shouldn't be there. And these bacteria immediately respond to fermented foods and sugars. So people that have FODMAP, as soon as they eat any kind of sugars or fibers, they get severe distension and bloating because they have bacteria that feeds off them in their small intestine that shouldn't be there.
Right. So it's still, okay. There's still bloating and distension of the stomach, but different mechanisms.
Yes, okay. But many people with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth have been shown to end up with leaky gut too, because those bacteria that are in the small intestine do create an inflammatory response when they're triggered by food, since they're getting exposed in that early state to them.
Right.
So you get a combination of both.
Okay. Yeah, I have experience, and so does Bob, with FODMAP, because I had a lot of brain fog and gut distension before I cleaned my diet up a lot.
Yep.
A lot of the stuff you mentioned is relatable for me.
Yeah, I mean, you're not alone. We get older, or we lose our brain cells. We get more neurodegenerative. We lose some of our brain gut access. Our immune system starts to age. We start to lose our immune tolerance. We start to react to different things. But these are the things that then make us sick, and then makes us have symptoms. And then, at some point in your life, you may have to make some dietary change of how your body's responding to function better. At some point in your life, you may want to take some nutraceuticals, whether it's anti-inflammatories or something else. Like maybe you want to, take things to support blood flow and circulation because your vascular dynamics are changing, or at some point you may want to do these things to function better, right? And this is where the world and field of functional medicine came in. The world of functional medicine is another specialty in healthcare. It's one that I'm involved with, and it's like, okay, we're not disease focused. We're focused on function. What's not functioning for you? Well, I get bloated and stunted all the time. Great, let's figure out why.
All right.
Yeah, you have bacteria in your small intestine. It shouldn't be there. You have SIBO. Let's put you on this diet. Let's see if we can change your microbiome richness and diversity. Let's measure it, see what your bacterial populations are. Let's see if interested foods in your stool. Let's see if you need to take some enzymes. And the goal is really just to improve a person's function. So another person may come in, they may have like fatigue and shakiness and lightheaded and irritability throughout the day, and then you find out, okay, well, what's your function? You're not functioning well. Your energy levels are fluctuating, and guess what? You're hypoglycemic. You're going too long without eating, and you can't have a smoothie for lunch. It's way too much simple sugars. So now you're crashing. Let's have you add some more fiber and protein, and that goes so long without eating, and then all of a sudden their function comes back, and now their depression, anxiety, and fatigue is all gone. But they didn't get a drug for depression. They get a drug for anxiety. They just fixed their blood sugar problem.
Right. They're looking at the origins instead of treating symptoms.
Yeah, and that's the world of functional medicine.
All right. So where can people find you at on your websites, and where can they get your books?
So my website is Dr. K News, drknews.com, Dr. K News, because my last name is Kharrazian, and that's really hard to spell. So I use Dr. K News. And then I do have free content on that, including a gluten and the brain book. So if there's a free online gluten and brain book, if you want to check that out, if you're listening. And we have lots of podcasts and videos and information trying to educate the public. And the goal of the website is to educate the public and let them eventually know about the books I've written. I've written 2 books, one on the brain, one on the thyroid, and we have some online courses on the brain, thyroid, food sensitivities, food allergies, to try to get information out to people. But hopefully it can be a good educational source for those that are interested in these topics.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure. And talk to you soon.